Yes, thank you, Melissa, for opening up these pathways in our thinking. Also, please take in mind, please carry your ideas, this inspiration into the breaking out sessions following these talks and discuss them in your groups. Right now, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker for today, who is Enrique Leff. Enrique Leff is a political ecologist and environmental sociologist at the National Autonomous University in Mexico. And Enrique is particularly very well known for his 22 years of contributions as coordinator of UNAM's environmental training network for Latin America and the Caribbean. And when I talked to Enrique just earlier this morning about what he's currently on to, he responded, I think, I teach and I write. And now, Enrique, the floor is yours to talk and to inspire us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. Well, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for having invited me to not only to join the steering committee, but to speak and to share some ideas with you. At this point in time, I wonder if my hard disk is not saturated with all the different creative ways of coding, our reflections about transformation and sustainability. It's a wonder, how each one of us tackles, gathers different discourses, their formation, our disciplinary formations, our own life of reflecting about things, and bring about, our very differentiated ways of recoding our narratives and our understanding about sustainability. So I was asked to speak in this, in this panel about this question about can transformation be facilitated, steered, or managed? And that brings me to a very basic question. What are we dealing with when we're talking about transformation for sustainability? Is it just any kind of transformation? In a way, I've been amazed about our rediscovering about transformation, our reawareness that the world, human world, the Anthropocene, as some people call it now, is an ongoing changing process. For the Greek thinkers, that was common sense. The generativity of physis meant an understanding that our world was in constant transformation. Maybe it's a fact that structuralism in science brought a kind of fixed view of our processes, and we lost track about this condition of transformation. But how do we think about transformation, and especially not just any kind of transformation? What is the core, the condition of this environmental crisis we're facing? Because sometimes we're talking too much about general transformation, and we're losing track about this specific question that brings us to think about transformation, which is building a sustainable world. Regardless of the fact that sustainability has been perverted as a concept, I still think that we cannot live without it. We have to construct, the concept of sustainability. And now, can that be geared by? It's a question for scientists, for science, for technology, for technicians. Who enacts this process of transformations toward sustainability, taking into consideration, as Melissa just stated, that there are different understandings and different paths. Some are unsustainable, but even in the kind of thinking about sustainability, what is really sustainable and equitable, brings different views into question. And that brings the political question and the intellectual question of how do you decide, how do you manage, how do you reconcile the different ways of thinking and acting, and driving these forces toward that end of sustainability. Now, if it's a question that's going to be answered by normal science and by economists, do we have any space to play there? I mean, or is it already like decided by an ongoing process that is deciding the future, is deciding the process? Economic rationality has taken us to a trend that is, in a way, already pre-deciding our future. And it is not a sustainable future. I would say we have to find out how this driving force, what Karl Polanyi called, the self-contained idea of the market system, the self-regulating market system. How is this driving, the world, the condition, the life condition, the ecological condition of this world towards something that I call the entropic death of the planet? And maybe I'll have to be excused of using a few scientific terms and a few philosophical terms in my talk right now. But the question is, can the future, the sustainable future, can it be decided? Decided by whom? Klaus Toffer, he brought into our conversation a few Jewish German philosophers, Hans Jonas, Hannah Arendt. Let me bring a non-Jewish German thinker. Some think he's the prince of thinking after the great Greek thinkers, and I'm talking about Martin Heidegger. When Martin Heidegger, facing this question about this critical question, not of the environmental crisis itself, or stated in that way, but what he called the world of the Gestell, the technologicalized world. How can we think about how humanity, or Western humanity, brought about this condition of living in a technologized world? How did we come to forget being, as he stated, what we did wrong, what was wrong, as that presentation yesterday night, what we did wrong to come to this point where we have put into this condition of survival of the species and of the ecological constitution of our planet. So Heidegger came to think in these terms. He said, what calls us into thinking? Was heißt denken? What calls thinking? And he said, his answer was the fact that we're not thinking. We're not thinking. And the question is, are we thinking correctly the condition of our world in this critical phase of the civilizatory construction of the human world? And then he stepped immediately to state that science does not think. It's a challenging statement. Science does not think. So when we're thinking that we can build up a scientific knowledge to gear our process towards a future, a sustainable future, can that be decided in terms of scientific thinking? Are we facing a change of paradigm, a Popperian change of paradigm? One that, our established paradigms are contradicted, falsified by reality, by our experimental ways of testing our knowledge in the world. Is it going to be driven by that kind of Kuhnian, Popperian scientific revolution that will bring about new knowledge? Is it going to be the emergence of the noosphere, as Teilhard de Chardin came to think about it? Are we coming out of a dark phase of history and now emerging into the illuminated phase of the noosphere, the anthroposphere, coming to the noosphere and liberating ourselves about the constraints of not coming to terms in understanding our world? I've come to think that environmental crisis is really the crisis of knowledge, the crisis of the ways that humanity, and mainly Western humanity, has constructed the world. The way we have come from this divergence between being and entities, where Heidegger claims that it was Plato's mistake in the comprehension of the ontological comprehension of the world, has come through all the history of metaphysics to the construction of modern rationality. We are governed by modern rationality. We are rational subjects. Our subjectivity is driven by this process of rationalization, where economic rationality, scientific rationality, has come to to engulf our subjectivities in a way that we understand in the way this was constructed. We're not free thinkers of our condition. We have been manipulated, in history in the way we come to understand our world. So environmental crisis is a crisis of this domineering, hegemonic ways of understanding and acting in the world. So when we're facing the construction of sustainability, can that be geared by this kind of scientific knowledge, or are we dealing with something that goes beyond scientific thinking? Let me bring another major thinker of our recent times, Jacques Derrida, and all the postmodern thinking. We're talking about not any kind of transformation, but the emergence of something that can be named as an upcoming event, l'événement. Can we think, can we say, can we speak the événement, the occurrence of this emergence, of this transformation that will bring maybe humanity into a sustainable situation, a sustainable condition? Lately I have, of course, Derrida says the événement is not speakable, it's not thinkable. And I would say another major thinker of the late times, who challenged even Heidegger, saying, of thinking otherwise than being. I'm talking about Emmanuel Levinas. That yet to be is not something thinkable through science, through positivistic science, through the objectivization of the world. So we're facing this challenge of opening our minds into other ways of understanding the world. And here I come, because there's little time to develop these ideas, to this challenge of liberating subjugated knowledges, as Michel Foucault would say. And we're facing that question. The question of sustainability is certainly the clash of different ways, not only now of understanding of thinking. It's not something academic, it's not something in the realm only of ideas. The real question now to construct sustainability are the clashing forces of different ways, of different rights, human rights, to reappropriate the world. It's a clash of different processes of territorialization, whereas, you know, the indigenous peoples of the South, of the North also, were colonized by this process of the construction of modernity 500 years ago. And all these knowledges, wisdoms, were subdued to that supra-thinking, supra-rationality. And now we have to face that we have a movement, social movements in diverse ways, that are contesting this colonization of their livelihoods, of their ways of imagining and of living in the world. So we come to this radical question of political ecology and on political ontology. Ontology in the sense of existential ontologies, of the rights of being. And the rights of being that come along with different ways of understanding, of practices, of being in the world, in the cosmos, in the ecological system, in your social relations to the others. And here we come then to a very radical question. What is it all about? I think the construction of sustainability has to do with bringing this critical, let's say, post-structural thinking, which thinks about transformation that cannot be predicted, but in liberating all these ways. So the way I figure, now the driving force in this reconstruction of the world cannot be thought only in terms of general dialectics, philosophical, ideal dialectics, or not even dialectical materialism. It's not the clash of capital and proletarian forces. It has brought about a very differentiated actors that are acting from the standpoint of their situated identities, claiming territories to develop the possibilities of redeveloping their ways of being. And actually, I think that the only transformation process that's ongoing in the world today that can counteract the driving force of this globalized capitalism or economic rationality, whichever way you want to name it, it's actually human rights, cultural rights that are rebuilding their environmental territorial rights. And this is the big clash of interest, reconstructing actually the world. Capitalism that it's unsatiable, that keeps on trying to continuously expand in a limited world, and the reaction of these communities trying to rebuild their livelihoods, their practices in this tense, very tense dialogue where a lot of hybridization occurs, And that brings us to opening to a concept beyond transdisciplinarity, of course, of interdisciplinarity, to think about dialogue of knowledges. Dialogue of knowledges is opening up to a dialogue with those other forms of understanding, of living in the world. And we must understand that, again, that is not an intellectual question, because the dialogue of knowledges is the encounter of these differentiated ways of living in the world. So how do you establish then, through democracy, the right, the condition about a politics of difference in the world? How do you open up again in this world the condition, the ontology of diversity, which has been colonized by another ontology, the ontology of modern rationality, scientific, technological, economic rationality? That is the big clash of two wheels of power, if I can use a Nietzschean concept. We have now this clash of wheels of power. That's the will of power of capitalism, of our will of power of thinking in our scientific terms, and there's another will of power, which is still embedded in the potentialities of what I would call the negentropic condition of our living planet, but that engages now in processes of reenacting that potentialities, ecological, sustainable ecological, negentropic potentialities of rebuilding the world in those terms, while the way that capitalism and economic rationality is running down the world to this entropic death of the planet is by the ways of objectifying nature, objectifying human beings, converting them into raw materials, that go into this machine of transformation, something we don't have to, we cannot gear. It's already established in this ongoing system, but that is transforming, it's transforming the living condition, the ecological, thermodynamic, and social condition of the planet towards this entropic end. So for me, this is what it is about, and what is the ongoing driving force to construct the future, an undecidable future in our terms, is that conflict. So again, taking what Marco and others have stated, it is this very complex, diversified conflict, which is not a methodology. It is a condition and cannot be solved by the will of another great German thinker, Jürgen Habermas. It's not through rational communication that we're going to solve that problem. So we have to establish then, and I will end with that, to deal with this politic of difference, we have to think, how do we establish in this world, legitimize the ethic of otherness? And otherness is something that cannot be resolved, reconciled in any kind of unity. Thank you very much.
Thank you.